he starts off this chapter with what he calls the is-ought distinction. Now, this is kind of a famous deal in ethics and philosophy because, and David Hume is one of the ones who talks about this a lot in his writing. So our good friend Hume, we're gonna have a go at him here.
Never get away from that guy.
Yeah. So here's a question. He says there's another way to think about what atheists are doing. They're attempting to bridge the gap between fact and value, right? Fact and value. In other words, can we get value from fact, right? So for instance, the grass is green as a fact. Well, what ought we or should we do about that?
Yeah.
Right. That's the kind of issue, right there.
The rock rolls down the hill. Should the rock have rolled onto me at the bottom of the hill?
Yeah. So he says, in here a specific case, he's trying to move from descriptive physical facts about the well-being of sentient creatures to value judgments about such facts. And he believes that there's this really good reasons for thinking that this bridge not only can't be reached, right? But it's impossible for this gap to be closed. And so that's what he wants to talk about today. He wants to consider Harris's view and Harris's attempt to bridge the is-ought gap. Sometimes this is called the fact-value problem, the is-ought problem, things like that, right? How do you get from an is to an ought? Right? Yeah. That's the idea here.
I was trying to think of ways to relate this, and it's probably not the best way because I don't think too many people have seen this movie, but there's a movie called Pi, P-I, based on the number, and it's about a mathematician trying to find a pattern within pi that then unlocks kind of the secrets in the universe. So able to predict the stock market, able to determine how people will act. So trying to find that scientific claim or that scientific value that will then provide you the determination that people will make choices about. And so he unlocks this kind of super mathematical scheme within pi and is able to kind of become superhuman in his mindset and then unlocks. I mean, it's really a really interesting movie. It's from the same guy that does Requiem for a Dream. So again, trippy movies. This guy does.
Yeah.
So if you want something that's again science fiction, here we're going to see if it's more fiction than science.
Yeah. So Harris's attempt might be more fiction than science here, right?
He at least tries. Like he understands that there is a need for. All right, morality. How do we deal with it? And he's going to put himself, at the tip of the sword against Hume, which is a scary thing to do for philosophers.
So let's look at what Hume had to say. Now, Hume actually called this is-ought issue a fallacy because he argued that you can't do this, right? Hume applied science to ethics. We found when he did that, we found two things, right? For one thing, he found that facts about the physical world. So the first thing when Hume says he applies science to ethics, that we can find facts, right? He found facts about the physical world. And then Hume also found sentiments or feelings toward these facts, right? So, here is a person killing somebody, right? That's the fact. And Hume says, okay, as an empiricist, as a person who just looks at, my perceptions and my sense perceptions and that sort of thing, that's all I have to go on. What do I see when the person kills somebody? Well, I see somebody killing somebody.
Right.
I don't see murder. I don't see wrong.
Right.
Right.
So murder, not in the sense of a legal description, right? It's has a connotation that there is a ethical claim behind that. So murder is the unjust killing of somebody.
Right.
Well, okay, you have a spy, he takes out another spy. Was it murder? Well, it depends on which government says it's, murder or not, and what laws are in place.
Exactly.
But there seems to be distinctions made within general society of well, no, spies do murder each other, and there are things like assassinations. You just don't call the taking out of a head of a state a political ploy.
Yeah.
It seems to be more than that.
So what Hume wants to say is we make this observation of the fact.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see any good, bad, or what evil, that sort of thing.
Right.
We just don't see it. And so what we do is we kind of feel it. That's what Hume says, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says Hume found that sentiments or feelings toward these facts is what we do, right?
Yeah.
For example, they are repulsive and wrong. But again, feelings, as Mitch Stokes says here, are paltry things to base something as important as, morality on. So Hume says we never observe that murder is wrong. We only feel that it is. So that's the Hume's analysis with regard to ethics, right? We can't make these observations. We do make these observations, but we never observe wrong. That comes from our feeling. Mm-hmm. And so Hume is suggesting then that it's not a good, valid, logical move to move from a fact to a value when all we have is a feeling.
Right. Yeah. You watch Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and you're rooting for every time that he murders somebody. That's your feeling. But if you were to see that same type of situation play out in the real world, maybe even from the actual Arnold Schwarzenegger, you would have a completely different reaction. And so, it is understanding that yes, you can distinguish between a real murder and a murder on screen, but you don't. There's no. Well, you've just inputted the same input, so why not have the same output between seeing over the top death scene versus someone a chalk outline right there on the street in front of your house.
Yeah. So Hume famously marveled, he says, at philosophers' effortless leaps over the is-ought gap. Oughts would arise from nowhere, out of nothing, Hume argued, right? Like magic. He says, I'm surprised, this is a quote from Hume, I'm surprised to find that instead of the usual compilations of propositions, is and is not, I meet with proposition that is not connected with an ought or an ought not. So there was no sign of the source of the mysterious oughts, neither observations nor inferences, and this is because Hume said, oughts cannot appear from physical facts or by way of inference from those facts. So morality cannot be grounded in sense perception or reason, no matter how tempting it is, right? All Hume said is all we have is, I don't like it, I don't feel good about that, right? This came to be known as emotivism in ethics, right?
Well, and we saw in chapters way back that Hume doesn't want to engage in philosophy, but all these oughts and ought nots seems very philosophical to me.
Yeah.
So essentially, what he's saying is that he'll talk to people about these actions that come about, and people want to ground their as we covered before, their really strong feelings on murder is wrong, rape is wrong, all these things that we have this intense feeling for. And so what they're saying is, here you have an action, and you just ought not to do it because it violates somebody's personal space, whatever it might be. But he's saying there's no preceding argumentation for that.
So we have a fact, and he's suggesting we can't go from a fact to a value. We can't go from the fact that this person is murdered or killed to that was wrong. That's what Hume is saying. Right. That doesn't work. That's not a logical move.
Right. That's
we don't observe wrong.
Right.
We
that's
just
grounded in a
fact.
scientific reality of you check off these boxes under the microscope and you've measured the wrongness of it. You have this feeling like, oh, I feel it's wrong, but aren't we just getting then into personal preferences again? Yeah.